Hello everybody. I'm going to start digging in here and try to get my new desktop computer, my new motherboard, up to speed. I've got it all assembled, ready to go, and what I need to do is, first off, I'm going to go in and set up the BIOS with the right settings. But I have a hard drive. It came off of my old motherboard, SATA version. And I need to get that operating. I need to set up, I have the new solid state on the motherboard NVMe drives, and I'm going to set them up in RAID, so I have to load the RAID drivers. So the way I'm going to go at this will be, I'm going to work a process, but we fire it up, we go into the BIOS, we make the settings for RAID, we make a setting, once that's up, set the array. We're going to set the SATA drive back to conventional so that it will run on the motherboard outside of RAID. Then we're going to go install drivers for the new hard drives, get everything set up and going, and then back up data and transfer it over to the new drives. That's grossly oversimplifying it, but that's the process I'm going to work through. First off, we just got to go see if it boots.
What I'm going to say is that this is actually very easy if you're not moving a hard drive. If you're starting off with a fresh window install on these NVMe drives, when you go to install Windows off your disk, there's a spot, and I don't remember if it's still the same. It used to be you'd hit F6 as you're getting into the setup program, and it would give you a chance to put in drives from a USB stick or a floppy drive in the old days. It would put in drivers that you needed that might not be on the Windows disk, especially for storage controllers because they're very hard to install later. Now, what I'm going to do instead is, since I'm moving it, I don't have the chance to go through that process. So I went to AMD's system and said, to look at their manuals to see how they would recommend putting in new drivers. There are user guides. A couple of them come with the download of the drivers. And this one, I think I actually ended up, I found this number in one of the other documents, searched online and downloaded it. But this one, this 53987, was really helpful.
Oh, look at that. We got lights on the motherboard. Give it a minute here when it comes up. Like that. Okay, let's see what we got here. New CPU tray. We need to reset the TPM. Yep, that's correct. So we'll do a Y. So the good news is it powered up. Alright, so there we go. And this one looks a little bit different than my last one, as I recall, but we'll get there in a second. So, it's currently in easy mode. So I guess the good news is that everything came up, recognizes the motherboard and the BIOS, Ryzen7 7700 8-core. Got my memory recognized, the frequencies running, the temperatures are good, the voltage, the memory frequency, system temp, CPU fans running, 1500. So all that looks pretty good. I have no bootable device because I've got my hard drive off to the side here that is disconnected. It's got a power cable on it but no data cable at the moment. It is recognizing that I have an optical drive attached to one of the ports, and my mouse at the moment isn't working. I'm not quite sure why, but for the moment I'll probably just have to use cursor. It does give me a load defaults F7, and I'm going to hit that just to make sure. Load optimized defaults. Let's do an F10. And do an exit and a reboot here, and let's get it to do a restart.
So number one, we're going to set things all to RAID, and you access the configuration utility, and the HII, I don't remember what that stands for, but that is the configuration utility in BIOS, so you can do it without a hard drive attached or without a operating system running. Just a couple of things showing where their quick start guides are and what it supports. And then if you go into their guide here, it tells you to power the system on and hit the delete key and go into the RAID expert configuration utility. And then here's what they call the pre-installation. This is where you're going to actually go in and set up. And from the system BIOS setup pages and in that advanced tab, they've got a CBS line, an FCH, a SATA. Tells you how to set these up and enable them, set them to RAID. So it'll tell you what options you want to make sure you enable SATA, then you want to set it to RAID, then you want to go to the PROM one and set it to RAID. Some of these things, the trick in this BIOS setup is that you need to do it sometimes in two different places for the same thing, or it doesn't work. That did trip me up for a while.
Any case, it's in easy mode. I want to get to advanced mode. So we're going to do an F1, advanced mode is an F2. There we go. So now we switch to advanced. Need to go over here to settings. Alright, so I'm going to make sure that I've got the SATA mode set to AHCA. And then I want to set the NVMe RAID mode to enabled. At NVMe I've got the two drives showing. Okay, so that's good. And going from memory, I need to go down to this one, this PROM 21, and it's still in AHCI mode. You want to make sure it stays there. USB ports. Alright, so I should be good at this point to reboot. Save and exit. Last modified. Turn the RAID on. Okay, so when it comes back up again, since I set the RAID mode, so go over here to settings, go to I/O ports, and now the RAID expert configuration utility is shown. It wasn't shown before because I didn't have anything set to go to RAID. So just as one more, so SATA still in AHCI, so we'll go to this one. So I need to go to physical disk management. I'm going to select one of these disks. The first one, 011. Well, it says no disk converted, so I need to select this one, 011. No disks that can be converted. Alright, so I've got the NVMe I had set to RAID. That turned on RAID expert. I've deleted the arrays because I was having trouble with. So I need to create an array, but I need to go to physical disks.
And then you can highlight the two disks, in each one individually, and initialize it and tell it to go.
There's 011 selected. Operations 011. I want to initialize that one. Turn it to enabled. And let that one go. And then I'm going to select the other one, 111, 111, and enable that one. Say OK. And it says it's ready.
Then you create the arrays. Once you get those all done, and you can figure out, some people, I'm doing RAID 1 to mirror drives, but there are other ones you could use and you could set up.
So now I'm going to back out, go back to array management, create an array at a level of RAID 1, which is mirrored. I'm going to select so check all, make them enabled, apply changes. I selected them. So let's go down here to the bottom, create the array. Array 1, RAID 1 says ready. Alright. Let's do a save and exit.
Okay, so once you get that all set up to RAID, then you go get your old school, your hard drive that was on a different computer, and connect it. These two NVMe drives are on the motherboard, and they're going to NVMe ports. And the board also has SATA ports on the edge where you plug in external hard drives. External meaning off the motherboard. So you get your SATA drive, plug it into that port. Then you go back into the BIOS, and the one where they had you set up SATA and point it to RAID, now you have to go from RAID back to ACHI. I don't know if I did that or if it's HCI. My acronym might have gotten messed up. I'm sorry. But either way, take it from RAID back to conventional and then boot back up. If you try to boot your SATA drive that hasn't been in RAID, in this doesn't have the drivers on it, it won't be able to boot in RAID. But if you put it over to AHCI mode, then Windows should find, the motherboard should find it, Windows should be able to boot into the operating system. So then you boot into that drive, get it up and running, your machine will be running just fine. And you'll be running off of this drive that's in a SATA port. It's really cool. Then you can run Windows just like you always do. And then you have this, I'm going to call it dormant pair of NVMe drives that are over on the motherboard doing nothing, just kind of sitting there.
Just now that I got that array going, I'm going to go back here and change the SATA mode back to HCI. And then I have to go into I need to go back a level. I need to go into the CBS and come down here and change the SATA mode back to AHCI. And that takes me back to the top. And then I'm going to go over here and save and exit. Now I'm going to go hook up my hard drive and boot the system up.
After you change that, you boot in there, and then you want to find your drivers. So the first thing they want you to do says power on the system. Well, we're already there. So you'd open up Device Manager, and I'll show that in a minute. And they want you to put in the RAID driver for NVMe. And so NVMe storage controllers. So you expand the storage controllers, you find the standard controller for NVM Express, and then you update driver software. So then you're going to browse back to your USB drive or your C drive or wherever you put the drivers. You do a right click, you say I'm going to pick from a list of drivers, you say you have the disk, you browse, you find that rcbottom.inf, click open, click OK, click next, close that one. Don't restart the system yet, and you'll find a second NVMe one, and you go repeat that process, and you got to put that rcbottom.inf on it. And then you go down to what's called unknown device section, because the Windows there'll be some things that they don't know what to do with, so they'll be in the unknown devices. And again, you do a right click and update driver software and browse. And this one, you want to go in and do rcraid.inf. Then there's one more, because you had actually 3 drivers that you had to do. And so this is the AMD RAID configuration SCSI processor device. And you'll got to find that one out of the other devices and put in the rccfg.inf and follow that same process. So basically you're doing, you've got these 3 drivers to load, usually in 2 different places.
Okay, now we have to install the RAID drivers for the AMD motherboard. And so they want me to expand the storage controllers space, which is down here. And it says standard NVM Express controller. And I want to right click this dude and say update driver. Install manually. Browse to where I put them. Well, it went ahead and installed the bottom device, even though that's what it was supposed to do. But I wanted there. I just wanted to find the file that I in on purpose there. Let it install. Then there are a couple of unknown devices here. Okay, now I got this one. I also need to update drivers on. And that one's done. So in the storage controller, I have 2 RAID bottom devices and 2 controllers. there's a RAID config device down here at the bottom that just installed. So now I'm going to reboot and make sure that this worked. Okay, so I'm back up now, and I'm going to check here in computer management. It says I need to initialize the disk, and basically instead of using MBR, I'm going to move this one to a GPT partition style as more modern. Tell that to go ahead and do that. But the RAID disk is there. The storage controllers are here. I go up to disk drives. There's a RAID Array 1 SCSI disk drive device. There's my backup drive. There's my SATA drive that I'm running off of at the moment. So this all looks good. There's a couple of question marks on here because I do have a couple of more drivers to load, but I didn't need them today. So there's like a Bluetooth one, and all right. So I'm just going to pick up that entire drive, and then we're going to back it up to. So now I've got the SATA hard disk that's in the computer all backed up. The hard disk is backed up to an external drive. Now I'm going to flip it around and set it up to install to the solid state drives. Alright, so I got I'm going to recover the disk, and you want to really be real careful. I don't want to recover it back to what I just took it from, but I got to find right here the RAID array that's 1.8 terabytes, 1.9 or something like that. And there's a note here that says the selected disk will be converted to a GPT layout that makes this disk bootable, because currently it's MBR, which is the old style master boot record, but I had to keep that because Windows XP needed it. Now that Windows XP is gone, I'm going to put it on this other disk. We'll hit recover now and see that it gets up and going. I like this tool, and this is a Cronus for Western Digital. It's a limited version of the tool. You can buy it at retail, but the Western Digital provides a limited copy of it as long as you're using it with a Western Digital drive. One thing that I really don't like so much is that the graphics, right? So when I was backing up, it says I was backing up from here to here. Now it's got the same legends on it. It's redoing something, but it's turned the arrow around. It says I'm going the other way, and down here at the bottom it says it's recovering, so it's making the calculations to recover, but it's a little disconcerting because the arrow basically makes it look like you're putting it back to the same place you took it from, but it should all be good. Just going to let her rock and roll here, and it'll probably take it a couple hours, and then we should be good. Well, I took my backup from the old mechanical hard drive off the SATA port that I backed up to a Cronus, and I did the restore to the array, the RAID array, which is 2 solid-state hard drives, the NVMEs mounted on the motherboard, and it's all good. And it's up and running, and life is great, except for some reason, this is to be expected. Microsoft, the activation is broken, and I need to reactivate it. And I'm going through the troubleshooter to reactivate it. I have a Microsoft account, and this machine is in my Microsoft account. But when I go to the troubleshooter, say pick one out of the list to replace, it's not working. So the troubleshooter actually has me put in my phone number so that a service person can call me, and we'll have to see if we can get this unwound, because I've done this before, and this wasn't an OEM license that came with the machine. This was a retail license to build, and anyway. The challenging part earlier on that I mentioned was this was a dual boot machine with XP and 10. Originally it was a dual boot with XP and 8, but that retail copy of 8 got upgraded to a retail copy of 10. Anyway, the problem that I had was that all the boot files were on the XP partition, and when you take that away, you have to rebuild the boot files on the Windows 10 partition that you're going to continue with. And Microsoft has a bunch of tools and ways to do that. You go in and go into with a recovery disk, you go into a command screen, command prompt, and there's fix MBR, and there's fix boot rec. There's rebuilding the boot records. There's about 4 or 5 different things that you're supposed to click through. And I've done this before, and you click through them, and it builds the files that you need, and you go. Well, this time it didn't. It kept saying, things like element not found, and oh man, it just drove me crazy for hours. Using a bunch of different recovery tools, some of which were Microsoft, some of which were third party, before I finally was able to. The idea that you couldn't get the tools that Microsoft gave you to rebuild, it would give you an error message, and then it's like, well, how do you fix that? And I ended up figuring out how to get in there and doing some system scans and check disks and enough diagnostics that all of a sudden she popped up and booted in. Don't know what I did different, but man, some of these things are challenging. Somehow it's up and gone, and as soon as I get a call back and figure out how to get this activated, my wife will be happy because she'll be able to get up and be doing some things she needs to do on this machine. But that's all for now.